So last class we started with the representation of a space matrix. So we discussed what is meant by dense matrix. So most of the elements are you even reserve a space for storing zero, which people wanted to eliminate because it doesn't make sense or much sense in storing zeros. So most of the transformation matrices, whenever you look into whether you are performing a DCT or FFT, apart from the fundamental frequency kind of stuff, others will be zeros. So whatever are relevant, only that can be stored, and hence because the scarcity of resources, maybe shared memory or constant memory in terms of GPU, whenever discussing about the resources, so strictly I'm speaking of only memory as of now. So there is a shortage, and hence if we can adopt for the other architectures where the memory representation can have a um, better storage capacity or the storage model. So we discussed somewhere around 3 or 4 models, say CSR, compressed space row, and then ELL, so elliptical representation. So then COO, or the coordinate system of representation, then the hybrid, so combining both ELL and hybrid, and the last one was GDS, or jagged diagonal. There is a minimal description even in your textbook, but just we will say that what is important for us is basically there are separate formats which will ease you to manage your memories better. Whenever think of parallel computations or space matrix computations, just state about that, how effectively or better you can utilize your memory for that matter. So compressed space row matrix, whenever you are looking into matrix, say Ex or the, this is a matrix which has to be represented, and how it is represented, you have a three data structures for that. One directly stores the values or non-zero values, to be very precise. So 3 1, it is row major. So 3 1, then there is a 0. 0 is not represented over here because space matrix representation they are neglecting zeros. Whatever are non-zero, then 2 4 1 1, or so these are the values, and corresponding column numbers are indicated. Once you represent that, then the row indices are also stored. So what is meant by row index? So 3 is, or whenever a new row starts, so the 0 1 2 3 5 index these values. 0 1 2 3 4 5, say 3 is where a new row is starting, and 1 is the other one. Yeah, okay. Say 0 1 2 is where the new row is starting. These are the row index. 2 4 1 is starting at a new row, and there is a zeroth row which has to be eliminated, and hence it is replicated twice. So zeros representation is gone. This is your CSR representation, or compressed space row representation, one form of representation as such. What it does, again, you just have to remember this. What is that? Numericals or the formulas, or the empirical formulas for that matter, how much reduction has happened with respect to the normal matrix representations. So, and when it is useful is stated by this equation. If s is less than 1 by whatever the number of digits you are representing, say m rows and n columns, and space elements, how many space elements are there. So with respect to that, you are computing how many storage capacity is reserved or saved for that matter. Okay. Structures, whenever you are writing code, how it is stored, or what is important for us is the column indices and row indices, or you are just storing the not all the rows, only beginning element ಏನಿರ್ತದೆ ಅದರದ್ದು ಇಂಡೆಕ್ಸಸ್ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ತಿರ್ತೀರಿ. So that is indicated, and number of rows and number of columns, yes, you are passing whenever you are forming a CSR structure for that matter. Okay. So how it is computed globally, and he is implementing a dot matrix product or the matrix multiplication with respect to the space matrix representation, and how do you compute, that is showcased via code. So what is important for me is just representation formats, and that's where I'm skipping this, just to have a connectivity from the last class to current class, and just recollecting that. Okay, ELL representations, what it is doing, basically the same representation. So whenever there are zeros, you are representing them by the star marks or the wild character or some negative number, so that you come to know that that was zero, or why it happens or why it is happening, because you are padding zeros whenever there are no elements. So you make it as some kind of a largest row. So elements should be equal to largest row. There is no element over here, but it is inserted because 2 4 1, this is the largest row, and you are inserting additional elements over there, or zero insertion or wild character insertion happens over there. Other than that, similar to your CSR, there are values and the column indices are being stored. So whenever you have appended and you computed the values and column indices, now how you identify rows is, now you remap this into the column major index. So you are mapping or storing them as a column major stuff. So he's having an option A and option B. So how do you represent that? So either by 0 or wild character or -1. So whenever you are mapping them, you are having column indices, and row is automatically taken care. There is no separate row as in case of CSR format. So there are column indices, there are values m and k. K is the largest row, or the number of non-zero elements in a row wherever the largest non-zero elements are present. So that is showcased. So that is your ELL representation. Again, the code showcases how do you index that, and overall you have reduced the what is it, a number of elements that are required, or the whatever the elements in, even though you are using a multiple elements, say int, float, or the say values, row index, column index, m, n, and other structures. So whenever you are planning along with all the other numbers or the other elements as well, fine, other than the matrix elements. So he is showcasing how much enhancement is happening with respect to the thing. And the other format was straightforward approaches. So whenever you have a non-zero elements, you just have the row and column both index. So this is more applicable whenever you have more number of zeros. So very sparse matrix, and that is discussed in the later part of the slides as such, which is more relevant and when. Other than that, what you have to carry out, or what we have to remember is this format. Say what is meant by dense, how much memory allocations should happen whenever it is a dense matrix, it is mn. So whenever you are going for a 3 2 matrix, so 3 mns, so in this, so what should be the yes? So basically, if it is a fraction, then only you are able to reduce mn, otherwise it is not so much relevant as such. Okay, so coup format, say column, row both are stored, and then there was a hybrid format, inclusion one of ELL and as well as coup formats that was indicated. So average length, or whenever you are having this matrix, so there is a two non-zero elements are present across all the rows. So and hence one wherever that minimum two non-zero elements are present, that is going with the ELL representation, and one additional element, or the so one row is having a larger or the additional elements, so that is going with the coup representation. So you are storing those numbers, exactly storing the row index and column index of these three values as such. So it combines both, and it is called as a hybrid representation format. And the memory savage and savings that can happen with respect to this is indicated by these formulas again. So after this, where we stopped is basically jagged diagonal storage. So GDS was the format where he reforms, of the idea is basically sort the matrix in terms of large to smaller. So upper triangle or lower triangle is whenever you are sorting that. So what you are storing is row indices. So this is the fourth row, say 0 1 2 3 4 and 3 2 so the fourth row is coming first row is coming next, and so on. So this is 0 1 and so that's how the elements are sorted, and they are carried out, and so that representation saves some amount of memory with respect to the normal storage, m cross n storage of a matrix as such. So everything will have their own advantages and disadvantages. So JScripts can be naturally mapped to CodaBox. So whatever we are stating right now is only with respect to memory perspective, but whenever you want to rearrange, padding of zeros and other things, so there is some kind of computational overhead even associated with respect to whenever you are going for a storage. So that has to be debated. And as we have stated, which is best when, so roughly you should be somewhere aware of the kind of data you are dealing with. So whenever you are aware, so roughly random, then ELL is best for you. And if it is what is it, probably say more variance or sparsity is there, or the widely distributed, then hybrid co or say ELL model, and triangular formats JDS is best. So extremely sparse and co. So only few elements, and then you can directly store the row and column index, and that can happen. So other than that, there are few more matrix representations. Uh, so with respect to examinations and other perspectives, so or whatever is present in your textbook as such is a CSR, ELL, COO, hybrid, and that is ELL and COO. JDS just is touched upon, not dealt in detail. Problem solving maybe with respect to only these formats. So JDS is just an introduction as such. So there is a sorting kind of stuff that has to be taught or visualized. We are stopping at that juncture, and this chapter finishes with respect to that aspect. So how do you represent space matrix representation? So we move on to the next chapter, entitled parallel programming and computational thinking. So what is meant by parallel programming? If anybody can interact, that would be better. So after all these explanations, whatever we have dealt with respect to homogeneous computing, heterogeneous computing, and what is basically parallel computing, or what you are trying to do, what are the goals you want to achieve by parallel computation as such. Anyone? So it's as good as I'm asking in the midway, why I'm doing what I'm doing. So parallel computation, or heterogeneous computing, or CUDA computation, whatever you can think of. Yes, anyone? So there are three statements I'm going with respect to a textbook as such. The first one is to have a problem solving in a lesser amount of time. So most often, whenever you are writing a code or any application you want to resolve or functionality you want to get into, so basically you want to get it computed in a very much less amount of time. Fine. Um, Roughly giving an example, something similar to your, I just want to crack a password. That is my requirement. Um, what is the requirement for that? And normally any cryptography and other stuffs, whatever you state that, so non-hackable, or the number of computations, say whenever you say that 2 raised to 120 or to 128 bit encryption or SCDS is something of that sort. So it takes years together to crack that. So you have to try out all the combinations. Even with a supercomputer, it takes a lot amount of time. If you have more computers, and so computation is enhanced, and you can try out with all the patterns, and maybe you can achieve that in a very less span of time. So within a validity of the message, if I say that some message is being passed, so the validity of the message is within 1 day. So any parallel computer architecture school is, if you are able to crack that code, or find a password or whatever the pattern within 1 day, then it is useful. Otherwise, you may get into solution by all the resources whatever you have invested, but is of no use. That's how the normal cryptography or the encryption decryption should work on. So what I'm trying to state is, so you require more resources or more parallel computations, so that you arrive at a solution or converge at a solutions at very fast, so or very within less time. He gives an example of some problem statement. So maybe the electrostatic forces that were inserted or enforced onto atom by its neighbors as such. So some computation that was taking 200 hours, so with the parallel computation is going for 4 hours. So there is a lot amount of time saved, and hence time gained. And the second statement states about when do you really require parallel computation of the is basically the bigger problem statements. So what is meant by bigger problem statements or the bigger data? Say most general example whatever I gave during the introduction of this computation or the parallel computation is basically weather forecasting. So whenever you are forecasting weather, you are analyzing some huge data, say 100 years of weather of that particular data, precipitation, temperature, and other stuffs. So that were happening largely. So whenever that was visualized, so you have huge data, and that has to be analyzed as such, and um, the problem statement is bigger. Or you want to find a gene computation, say over a generation, whether the progeny will develop a diabetic or color blindness or any genetical irregularities, that BT code or biotechnology, something of that sort. So whenever you want to find out or current vaccine or corona or something of some gene computations or gene pattern that sequencing you want to identify, there's a huge data that is available that has to be uh, analyzed. So whenever the problem statements are bigger, such problem statements require huge resources or parallel computations, that is bigger problem statements. The third one is you want to find a better solution. So how do you analyze a better solution, or can you think or infer how does parallel computing gives a scope for better solution as such? 1 minute, please. Okay. So I can just give my example of when I was working in XP. So I was working on a tool called NCC Formal Verifier. So NCC Formal Verifier is mathematical model tool where you want to find the bugs with respect to your Verilog or any HDL codes, whatever you have written, where there are many bugs of the device or IP or IC, whatever you are simulating, is not working according to a specifications. So in general, it works whenever you run regression testing. Regression testing is a testing when you generate all possible input vectors and pump onto that and test whether it works for all the cases. So it is as good as just to make you visualize. If I state that, how do you test a normal AND gate? A normal AND gate is, so you have a truth table. So whenever you pump 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, whenever you pump them. So basically what is happening is you have verified it for working as an AND gate. If I say that, what happens if after 0, 0 immediately 1, 1 comes, immediately 1, 0 comes. So you are analyzing after a particular pattern, next pattern, whatever it is, and then you are analyzing for all those aspects. If I say that it is not only with respect to 0, 1, now X and Z also are included, that enhances the spectrum, or you have to verify of the convergence cone for the larger number of inputs. So I think from perspective of whenever you have a 32-bit processor and 2 raised to 4 GB and all the 4 combinations of 0, 1, X, Z and so on. So whenever we were trying to find the bugs, basically there are algorithms which are very specific to particular kind of. Say, I want to find nodes which are stuck at 0, stuck at 1, and different aspects of the algorithms that can solve the a particular coverage is not, code is not covered. So whenever we are trying to find out a corner cases, there were algorithms something like a hammer, sword, uh, scissor. So they were named in that tool in such a manner that they are very specific. So they operate on a particular kind of things. So similarly, for finding the bugs and running the regression tests, so these were running. Assume that they were running on a single machine or whatever the homogeneous computer you can think of. It is running sequentially. So first I will try out all my test code with respect to hammer or certain kind of algorithm. Then I will try it out sword, then scissor, knife, and so on. So, whenever you are making that attempt, you are wasting so much amount of time. If I say that parallelly there are machines reserved for me for running the same code or the testing. So the same code is parallelly or concurrently tried with a scissor, sword, hammer at different parts apart. So you can find the best results apart, so that all the algorithms state that it is bug free and then it is now ready to get released into the market, something of that sort. So a better solution or the effective solution that can be sought out whenever you are went to, or what are the goals of parallel computing. Basically three goals, that is one is minimum computation time, and you can deal with the bigger problem statements and you can have a better results. That's how I can summarize the goals of parallel computing from your textbook as well. whenever you are doing that, even though it is not directly, I'm not inferring from your textbook as such, but what you are doing is basically you are discussing the two laws of computer architecture. One is Amdahl's law and Christopher's law, as I stated even in the previous lectures as such. What is happening is concurrency and granularity. What is meant by concurrency? Concurrency is whatever the piece of code that can run parallelly or concurrently is normally regarded as concurrency. Granularity is how much together you are running it. So coarse is you are combining your how coarse is your grain. So basically you may combine all the stuff, whatever the computations or monolithic kind of code, or the code has many submodules or the modular development, so that they are yielding some results and finally they are integrated together. If you can imagine something of that sort. uh, if you want to have everything at once, most often you are troubling with respect to memories, because you are combining a larger grain, and what you have enhanced is what presumably I just don't want to have a repetitive conversations. But if you miss something, then there's a large chunk of memory which has to be downloaded back or swapped back to the global, and from global you have to fetch back. So there's a threat whenever you're choosing that granularity as such. If you choose a granularity with minor grain or fine grains, so some computation they're computing, so then there should be lot many communications as such. Now the same work is divided among four people. Now rather than working, they are communicating. So how much everyone has to do. So there is a lot of communication that has to happen with respect to individually whenever you are going for division of a work or the granularity. That's the same aspect. So whether it's a computation driven or communication driven, with which algorithms are classified, and which is better trade-off, and finally you choose one. So granularity deals with respect to computation to communications. So whenever you message passing interface or private virtual machine, so this is this speaks about coarse or fine instruction level. You are working at a so risk kind of instruction level parallelism work ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ತೀವಿ. So at that level the parallelism is extracted. So threads or tasks you are working at message or shared memories synchronization. So basically how coarse or fine is your grain defines your the same statement. Now in your textbook, maybe in the third or fourth chapter, I just don't remember the chapter number as such, he is represented as global to global memory communication to the computation CG, so computation to communication ratio, that's what is we are computing. So that we want to give more importance for computation rather than communication. Okay, that's where you try to fix up the grain size. Okay, 0-byte message consumes in a process major time spent in communication that cannot be spent in computations. Overlapped message portion of such that can occur concurrently with computation. So whenever we are stating overlapped messages, we are assuming that CUDA say this slide is I have taken from the computer architecture stream message. So CUDA has separate global and shared memory or constant memory kind of architectures. Whenever you are speaking with respect to this, so normally we analyze with respect to memory systems OMA, NOMA, and COMA. So OMA is uniform memory system, non-uniform memory system, and cache memory systems. So message passing or MPI systems happens whenever you are stating that no processor owns the memory, or they own a bit of private memories whenever you want to access from that private memories. So cache only memories or the COMA memories. So you just pass a message, and the processor sees the viability and sends you the data whatever requested for through a message passing. That's what happens. So there can be more communications with respect to time. So you have requested, it has not been sent, and that can happen. So that is what is meant by communication overhead as such. Lots of little things add up overhead and a parallel computation, so that overlapping headings, overheads as much as possible, non-overlapping overheads small as possible, so that how effectively can communicate, so that the communication happens is done. Now Amdahl's law states about for a fixed problem statements. So execution time on a single processor, if you execute on n parallel processor, whenever I'm thinking of that, we assume that a similar kind of codes or the same kind of processors. So serial and parallel, whenever you have a n processor, so much amount of speed up happens. So 1 by ts is speed up. Ts is your execution time or the delay you can consider. Okay. Algorithms also play a role. He is going for a sorting algorithm. So quick sort algorithms takes n log n computations of the linear set with respect to whatever the data set size, and the other one is merge sort. Linear speed up in whatever the notation, big O notation, we are stating n processor parallel programming. So what ultimately is happening is there is certain amount of time you are waiting for certain data you have requested and he has not retrieved, and there is certain overhead, so that synchronization has to be established. It's mutually exclusive, ownership has to be changed. So those are all overheads you can just visualize or think with respect to that aspect as such. So it is not continuously computation. So there is what should be the trade-off with respect to these colored blocks and white spaces is to be debated. Fine. And what Amdahl's law strictly states is basically if there are n processors, I have enhanced my processing capability by n processors. So uh, for what is happening, f is a fraction of computation that is serial. So completely sequential, no matter in whatever. So there's a inherent nature of that functionality that code has to run sequentially. There is no scope for parallelization as such. And remaining 1 minus f is which can be parallelized. So whenever this fraction which can be parallelized is run by the parallel portion. So there are n processors available for you. Now there is a parallel portions, and hence whenever the speed up is sorted out, so this is a speed up that is achieved. If you think, say, whenever you have that, uh, I don't bother about the money as such. So you can just pump on as many cores or as many processors possible for the computation requirement as such. So whenever you extend that limits and find out the limits, at the maximum you can attain 1 by f improvement in the performance as such. One example that is showcased with respect to Amdahl's law, whenever you are thinking of a parallelization as such, say that there is a calculation has 4% of serial quotient that states that 96% of the code is parallelizable, so you can run it concurrently. And he has taken example as he has 16 processors at his stake, so that he can utilize them for improvement as such. Now what is the improvement that has happened? 16 by 10. So with respect that the portion maximum speed up is 0.004 is sequential, so you can attain at the maximum 25 times speed up compared to the original. Even though 96% of the code is parallelizable, the attainment of speed is only by 25 times whenever you are having 16 processors. So you have formulas, and whenever you want to change the numbers and just check out, so that comes out to be that limit 1 by f. Fine. Then Amdahl's law states, or it is for a fixed problem statement. So I'm changing my computer architecture for a particular fixed problem statements. You are not thinking from the perspective of growing problem sizes. So whenever Gustafson's law is discussed, so scaled speed up with on account of not only the processor growth, but also the problem statement is growing bigger and bigger. So what you are accounting is a serial part and parallelizable part. So they are still same, but you are accounting for the what is it? Problem statement is also enhanced whenever you are going for a enhancement of the parallel computation. That is stating with respect to Gustafson's law. So derived by fixing parallel execution time. So fixed serial execution. So many practical situations, Gustafson's law makes more sense. Just as we have stated, bigger computers solve bigger problems. So whenever you have already invested in terms of more processors, so now you can take up more number of the larger problem statement as opposed to the Amdahl's law. So you are having a fixed problem statements and you are trying to optimize the entire architecture for only that particular problem statements. So because problem statements or the scaling up is a normal nature of any computation or any industry for that matter, so Gustafson's law makes more sense. Okay. So I just stop at this juncture and come up to the what is it? What is meant by computational thinking as such? So as this slide states, it can start from the LKG to any level, so PG, PhD, postdoc, or whatever you can think of. So it's in daily basis or daily approach. Some example, how do you resolve that? That you have to discuss and resolve within yourselves. So simple daily example, say you want to look up a name in alphabet order, sorted list. So how do you make it happen? So if you're searching for your name in a result sheet or something of that sort, you are looking into. So start at the top. So linear approach, you start looking from A to Z, where your name appears, or to bifurcate it, binary search. So upper half, lower half, and then upper half, lower half, and so on. So binary search. So within what iterations you are able to get into what you wanted. So standing in line at a bank and supermarket, customs and immigration, say uh, you want to, or can you analyze how much time is taken by that officer to clear every person? So processing time per candidate as such. So what if I put parallel counters and so on? So putting things into your child's knapsack for days, prefetching and caching. So what is important and where you want to keep it? Say front packet or the backpack. So how easily accessible a particular thing should be. That's or makes sense with respect to how do you organize your memory. Say what to be kept in a register, cache, and whatever the other memory architectures. And so traveling, so sportsmanship of what is to be done first, what should be next, or whenever you plan for the defense line or who are the attackers. So there should be some strategy whenever you are playing a game that has to be or computational thinking, or whenever I just want to tag to that particular title as such. You are doing it, but we are making it more formal kind of stuff as such. Or cooking a meal, so what things you can do parallel and what are to be strictly sequential whenever you are cooking. So cleaning your garage, so what has to be kept where, and how do you maintain your stores, how do you maintain what is consumed, what is not consumed, and how frequently you update the consumables, some policy as such. So Lego kits, how do you arrange or build up a robot or whatever the stuff, so mechatronics or mechanics kind of Lego kits that are available? How do you make sure that you are building a particular model or demo model for that matter? So it's almost everywhere that is available with respect to computational thinking. That has to be discussed and debated as such. Mm, we have also stated what is algorithm. One more topic in your textbook, he is going for a particular problem statement, that is um, vibration of or the electrostatic charge accumulation, or the force that is exerted by one atom on one atom by its neighboring atoms, and the algorithms whatever you are choosing uh, to choose a data set onto that. But in general, whenever you are looking into or whenever I just want to make it more general, not pertaining to some exact problem statement or whatever here discussing, whenever look into the softwares like ANSYS, MATLAB, or CAD oriented analysis for that matter. So basically, we're dividing entire architecture into smaller particles or smaller chunks with respect to vector forces onto it. So normally that is called as a FER, finite element analysis or finite element modeling as such. So once you have done that, how much, so where the crack develops, or the how temperature deals with respect to that MEMS oriented sensor, or you want to analyze something onto that. So hyper meshing, how many objects, coarse grain. So how do you hyper mesh it? Once you mesh it, how many forces are to be taken together? Where do you fix up your boundaries? How many neighbors need to be taken? What is the boundary? Say if I say that q1 into q2 divided distance square, so how much distance is really some element exerts a force, and that is accountable, or that can be, or that should be accountable, so that you build a more realistic model. So that has to somewhere you have to train yourself for the visualization aspect of algorithm research. Also, what again I am going with respect to a textbook selections as such. Um, what what are the criteria you choose whenever you are selecting an algorithm is a definiteness. So a notion that step precisely stated, there is no room for ambiguity. So every time you repeat that or the sequence of process, you end up in the same results. So or reliability or definiteness, that has to be taken care whenever you are taking an example of or selecting an algorithm as such. So then effective computation. So how much computation is carried out by computer algorithm must be guaranteed to terminate. So there should not be any unexplored or the, so whenever you're building FSMs, say if else statements, if you say if condition and there is no declaration of else statements, and then somehow that pattern is coming into picture whenever you are simulating or you are running your show. So you, because you are not stated what to be done whenever you arrive at that state, only if conditions, not else conditions are declared in our codings. So there is no indefiniteness. So that is not good for selecting algorithms. So there should be some definiteness. All the possible clauses are to be discussed and guaranteed as such. Then effective computation is guaranteed to, so algorithm should be able to terminate. And finally, it has to be numerically stable so that there's a proper sequence of operations that has to be carried out, and finally yield the correct results. The other thing is with respect to the how well or effectively it is able to utilize your resources. It may be memory, IO, or any other stuff you can visualize whenever you are computing. There is one example again, maybe I discuss in the next class. So direct summation, cutoff summation, and cutoff summation using direct summation. So that is declared. Okay. So computational thinking is again having four components as per the computer architectures you are dealing with, whether you are dealing with simultaneous let's say instruction multiple threading. So single program multiple data, single instruction multiple data, single instruction multiple threads, and so on. So which architecture suits you and why? There should be proper reasoning with respect to that, and you have to fight for the trade-offs. Programming models and the compilers. So whenever you are discussing that, whether I have to go for a CUDA, OpenMP, or OpenCL, or should I have a AMD architectures, which compiler is good for you? So most oftenly CUDA is floated with what is it, Visual Studio. So that is somewhere you are stating that compiler selection also matters, so that ultimately there's a, okay, inclusive and exclusive parallel dialects. So whether compiler takes ownership of dividing the code in terms of what has to be executed where. So as in case of CUDA compiler, we say that there is a host running. So some serial piece of code will be normally running the host machine, and wherever the parallel architectures, parallel things come into picture, so they are diverted. So it is done by a programmer, but there is a just-in-time compilation and building that happens during the runtime. So that means NVIDIA CUDA compiler is taking the ownership of dividing that ownership of parallelization. Yes, in assistance with the programmer as such. So that is dialects, so parallel dialects, how they are available and how you can use them, API support. So that's compile selection, and then algorithms. So you had discussed a matrix multiplication or 1D convolution and other algorithms for that matter. How to store. So basically, matrix multiplication whenever you are computing with the global scenarios. So most oftenly you are wasting loading and reloading, or there is a more global memory access that were happening. So whenever you have gone by tiled approach, so whenever you fetch certain row or certain column elements, so they are utilized for more than one computations, so that frequent communication with respect to global memory, and hence the hindrance or the performance of entire computation uh, can be eliminated. So domain knowledge, what you are doing and why you are doing so what is the best method to arrive at. So you should have for what you are computing, and that speaks about domain knowledge. Numerical methods of accuracy and rounding or approximations, say how much is really good or bad. Whenever if I say that, um, So milliampere, microampere, picoampere, and I'm electrical engineer. If I can bifurcate that and I can have a computation or fix up the stability or precision, what is really makes some sense. I'm not really going with respect to computation and so how much havoc or the smoothness that events can still conduct with respect to approximations we are making. So starting from first semester or bit, you start with respect to this thing works within a particular limitations as such, or there is a box. What is engineering? Everything works, but you have to find out what is the boundary so for that working as such. So what is the working environment? That speaks about domain knowledge. I'm just making it more generic as such. Okay, then that's I think almost we have ended. But anyway, I just brush up this entire chapter once again. So we'll meet in next class. Any doubts you can put in the uh, classroom streaming. So or you can directly ask right now. Any doubts? Okay then. I will close my session for today. Okay, thank you.